Hello, and welcome to the Rubber Duck Dev Show. I'm Chris.
I'm Krustin.
And I'm Ernesto.
And tonight, we get to pick the brain of a code quality expert. I'm really excited about this one. This is like one of my favorite topics. Keeping your code good quality, using the metrics, using the tests, all that good stuff. So we're going to dig deep into that tonight. But first, there's one little thing I want to share with you guys, and that is that Andrew Mason today tweeted out about a teacher who is starting she's teaching a preschool class for special needs kids, and they didn't give her much money for supplies. So she put together a wish list on Amazon, and we're trying to see if we can get some people to help contribute and make that better. So if you're following us on Twitter, I've got the link pinned on the Twitter page, and then I've also just put the link in the chat if you want to go take a look at that. Be a really good thing. She's getting a lot of support, which is really, really good, but these kids, need help. So that'd be great. Before we get into the meat of tonight, which I'm really excited about, Creston, how was your week?
Pretty hectic. I was just communicating before. It's like when I have longer running projects with different consulting clients, it's usually an easy week. But when I have clients that, hey, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, the context switching just makes the week more stressful. Although I did release a really good feature for my SaaS product of allowing volunteers to create their own fundraising pages. So that was a good feature I was able to deploy this week. What about you?
Well, we had some hectic things, and they were some of them were caused by the topic of tonight's show. There wasn't enough code quality checking, and it bit us in the butt. Something I've been working on since I got to the company is kind of improving the code coverage, test coverage, and making sure things are good and starting to refactor, monolithic classes apart and things like that. So we kind of got bit. I was just doing an emergency release to production not long before the show because we had a little snafu there because an edge case got through that we hadn't thought to test.
Those are 3 words I don't like hearing. Emergency production deploy.
Yeah, I wasn't fond of it myself. So this is actually a timely show because it's stuff I've been having to pay attention to really closely this week. How about you, Ernesto?
Yeah, well, happy to be here. I think this week has been kind of all over the place. I run a small software development shop, and I wear multiple hats every every week. So this week in particular, I am here. So that's part of like me just going out there and sharing some of the work that we are doing and some of the projects that we're launching. So I was in Drew Brack's show on Monday.
Yep.
I think that will be released in September. And we were talking a lot about Rails upgrades and code quality and performance optimization and all that jazz. But yeah, I think I didn't get to touch a lot of code this week, but I did get to merge a couple pull requests that had been open for a few months to open source projects that I maintain. So that's always nice to go in and look at the PR and be like, yeah, this actually looks good. Sorry it took so long. Merge it and just ship it. So yeah, I've been doing like a few little tiny things related to code these days.
Cool. Yeah, it's we were talking before the show. Seems like the further you get into senior development, the less development you actually get to do, which is sometimes can be kind of a bummer, but That's just part of the game, I guess. All right, so code quality. So the first question, I've been a fan of RubyCritic for, well, since it came out. I accidentally stumbled across it and fell in love with it. So one of the things I've been wanting to ask is why? Why did you do that?
And should we preface this that he came up with RubyCritic first?
Yeah.
No, I need to be 100% honest. I did not create RubyCritic. It was
Okay.
someone else. So
Okay.
I did volunteer to co-maintain it with their maintainers a couple of years ago. And I mean, I love the project, and I was trying to combine some of the metrics from RubyCritic with some of the metrics from SimpleCov, and I ended up creating a new project that extended RubyCritic. And then I made some contributions to the project and reached out to see if they needed help maintaining it, and they did. And usually that's my experience in general. Like when you make a couple contributions to a project and then you reach out to them and you say, hey, do you need help like triaging issues or reviewing pull requests? Usually people are really nice and open, and they don't have a lot of time, so they always welcome help on that front. So anyway, the guy who was maintaining it was like, yeah, sure. I'm actually working with Go a lot more these days, so I don't work with Ruby so much. So now, and he was just like happy to add me as a maintainer there. Um, so anyway, yeah, that's how I ended up at the RubyCritic maintaining maintainers group, I guess.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about what got you into Ruby in the first place.
Yeah, so I think many years ago I was working with Java back in the day when struts and wetworks was a thing, and I was trying to build web applications with Java. And anyway, it was hard, you know. It was like a lot of configuration, a lot of XML, and not so much Ruby or Java code back then. So with my friends from college, we wanted to start our own agency, and we had a client lined up that wanted us to do either Python or Ruby, so Django or Rails. And when we looked at the community, we really liked the Rails community, so we decided to go with Ruby on Rails. And yeah, the rest of is history. That was about 13 years ago. So we started using Rails, and at first I hated it. I gotta be honest. Like I hated the magic. I was like, wait, how is this working? Like I just type two commands and it's working. Like where's all the configuration? I was like, no, well, there are all these conventions that Ruby or Rails has. So anyway, that's how all the magic works in Rails. And in retrospect, I think I would have liked to learn Ruby first and maybe Sinatra, and then learn Rails. But I did it like the wrong way. I learned Rails first and then Ruby, and now anyway.
Well, then I've been doing it the wrong way for years.
Oh, me too.
Good. I'm not the only one.
Nope. I started down the Rails rabbit hole long before I got to the Ruby one. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so and then tell me a little bit about, because from what I've been reading and seeing in the in Twitter and things like that, you're kind of the go-to guy for code quality discussions. What got you kind of into that?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. Okay, no, I know. Okay, I know how to answer that question. So about 5 years ago, we did a Rails upgrade for one of our clients, and we thought, oh, this is cool, and it's like a formula that we can apply to other clients. So we decided to launch this productized service called fastruby.io. So people might be familiar with some of our guides or articles and all that. So we needed a way to quickly assess whether we wanted to work on a project or not. And we needed a way to quickly say, yeah, this project is ready for an upgrade, or no, if we do this upgrade project, um, we're gonna be in a mess. We're gonna be in, the little dog and the "this is fine" meme. Basically, we don't want to be we don't want to be that meme. So that happened. It happened a couple of times, and then we needed to come up with like a quick way to say, hey, this project is a good project or not. So we started researching on code quality, and we really like Code Climate for sure. We still use it to this day, but we really like RubyCritic because it was open source. It was very transparent, and we could quickly understand like how the grading system worked and all that. So then we started researching other code quality tools like Metric Foo. We ended up maintaining that project too. To be honest, like some of the code quality Ruby gems that are out there have been abandoned for a few years now. And we basically came around and reached out to the maintainers, and we were like, hey, seems like maybe you don't have the time, or you lost the interest in working on this project. So we're happy to help maintaining it. And that's basically how we ended up maintaining like a bunch of Ruby gems. Another one is Rails stats, which is kind of like the native rake stats that Rails provides, but you don't need to bundle the application to actually run it. So that can be very handy sometimes. But anyway, that's how we ended up like maintaining a bunch of code quality tools, because we end up using them when we assess a code base to say like, yeah, this project is in good shape. We want to work on the upgrade project. Or we say, hey, you should probably improve your test suite before we work on your project. And probably means if you don't do it, we don't want to work with you because you know,
It's
I
just
don't
going to
want to
be
say it.
nightmarish.
I don't want to say it, but it's likely that you don't really care about the tests, and that's just kind of like a symptom of a bigger problem in the organization.
Right. All right. So, and chat. Hello. How's everybody doing tonight? We are very glad that you're here, and I really hope that you brought some questions because this is the time to ask them. So what I want to do now is you guys just fire away with any of your questions or comments that you have in the chat. I'll kind of moderate that. And Ernesto, I'm going to just kind of put you on a free form track here. What would you like to tell people about code quality?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think tests, test first, or having a good test suite is super important, not just because it will save you from shipping things that are going to break and they're going to wake you up in the middle of the night because it broke. But so if you learn anything today is that you need to invest in your test suite, and you need to invest every week a little bit in your test suite and improving it and maintaining it. And that's going to pay off in dividends, like in the future when
Virtual
it's
high
time.
five. See,
Yeah,
chat, I
yeah.
told you.
If if you're gonna upgrade a gem, it's gonna help you. If you want to refactor, it's gonna help you. It's just a safety net that we want to have every time we are working with a code base, and we're there for the long haul.
And how do you kind of view the tests in relation to importance to the code? What's kind of your time split on working on those things?
Yeah, I think I would rather have a really good test suite and a very complex code base than very simple code but with no tests. I think that's as much as I care about the tests these days. And in terms of the I really like TDD. I don't do it religiously. I don't advise people to do it religiously. Sometimes you need to play with the interface, see how it works, do some manual QA. That's super helpful sometimes. But when you can't do TDD, I would recommend that you do it. It makes you think in a different way, makes you think about the edge cases before you even write the code. And then it can help you write even better code, or code that it's easier to test because you wrote the test first.
Yeah. Oh, I certainly agree with that. I've been on my soapbox about TDD and importance of tests almost every episode. So yeah, I mean, you and I are squarely in the same camp, which is great. And
So now Creston has to say like, no, the test suite sucks. I don't do TDD ever. It's a stupid practice. What are you guys thinking? No.
Well, I mean, the reality is if you want your system to go down or have severe bugs, then don't do tests.
yep,
Yes.
So it's like,
pretty much it.
yeah, or have super high anxiety, because if you're going to go in and change a piece of code that doesn't have tests against it, you're rolling the dice.
You're asking to never sleep again.
Yeah, and we still find teams out there and organizations that do not believe that investing in the test suite, investing time in the test suite is a good investment. Sometimes we pitch our potential clients like, hey, we can't work on the upgrade, but maybe we can work 4 weeks on improving your test suite, comparing your most used code to your test suite and seeing like, hey, you're really using all these actions and there's no code coverage for it. So maybe we can write tests for this and prioritize the code that is used a lot, but is not really tested in every single PR that you want to merge.
Out of curiosity, what tool do you use to track like what are the hotspots of the code? What's being used a lot, like in terms of controllers or models, or what tool do you use to do that?
Yeah, so you can use just an APM like New Relic,
Okay, any of the
Skylight.
APMs. Okay.
Or another way to go about it would be to use a gem called Coverband. It's like SimpleCov, but instead of using the test suite to tell you which actions are getting hit, it's using production usage. So you install the gem, you run it in production for a week, and then it basically generates like a SimpleCov report that tells you, 90% of the code was hit in production this week. There's 10% of this code that was not used. And then you can find candidates for dead code. And then you can say like, hey, are we actually using this action? Because it didn't get used in a whole week. Maybe we can remove it. So those are the 2 ways I would recommend.
Okay.
All right. So, chat, don't forget, you've got a big brain here on this stuff. So if you're wanting to learn, now's the time to ask questions. So there's a lot of tools out there for code quality stuff, right? And I know we've got some people in the chat and that listen to the show that are kind of just getting into the Ruby sphere and development sphere in general. What would you say to those younger folks, the folks starting out, about how to get involved and get your head around code quality and what to do with it?
Yeah, I think there are some really great articles out there about code quality. If you've read anything by Michael Feathers or Sandy Metz, you've basically gotten an introduction to code quality and maintainable code. One of the concepts that I really love is this idea of like churn versus complexity. So let's say you inherit a code base and you're trying to figure out like, okay, is this in good shape? What's going on with this? If you can use RubyCritic, it's very easy to, gem install RubyCritic, app or whatever, and it will generate a report for you. Oh, Chris, do you want to pull that up? Awesome. Yeah, so I think this is awesome because it's a dashboard that gives you an idea of what the project is like. Um, when you look at the upper right section, you're going to see the churn versus complexity graph. So basically, like files that change a lot have high churn, and files that are hard to maintain are very complex. So when you find the dots that are like high churn, high complexity, that's going to point you in a direction that says these are files that probably don't have a lot of quality. They're changing a lot, they're super complex, and you might want to be careful if you're going to be touching those files. Wow, okay. Seems like you run this in a project that doesn't have code coverage data. One of my first contributions for RubyCritic was to add a fourth section called coverage. So I guess this is some sort of magic there. But if you run the test suite with coverage or simple cov enabled, it's going to generate a bunch of files in your directory. RubyCritic can detect those files, and it can add a fourth section to this report that says code coverage. And anyway, some sort of homework for your audience is to run RubyCritic with an app with code coverage data or without, and they'll see that section.
Right.
But anyway, going back to the original question, I think it's very useful to look at this report and see, like, that pie graph tells you, okay, most of the files are an A, a B, or a C. For non-US people, that means, that's it's the A to F grading system. So you get an idea. A is good, F is bad. So there you can see that probably like 12% of the files are on F, but everything else seems to be in pretty good shape. So yeah, I think churn versus complexity, the moment that I learned about that, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Because yeah, if you worked in a project for a long time, then there's a lot of history, and you can learn from your history and the files and what it looks like right now, to be careful as you start making changes in a code base that you don't know.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I started using things like RubyCritic, I was pretty much just concentrating here, the grading stuff, which is good to know, but I didn't really understand this graph, the churn versus complexity graph. When I finally understood what this meant and what it was showing me, it made a huge difference in how fast I could target things that needed help. It's just, look in this quadrant up here, that's probably where you want to start looking. Everything else could use some help, but this is probably the best bang for your buck. Just look at this quadrant and pick the things in here if you're wanting to
Yeah,
do refactoring.
yeah. And this is fun, and for people who just want to have some time to kill and to do research, they can go and run RubyCritic on their libraries. Like, you can go and run it on Rails, you can run it on Sinatra, Hanami, whatever, and you can find opportunities to refactor code and see how you can improve one of the libraries that you use every day.
Right, because it'll come through and tell you about smells and things that it finds, and it's really easy to set up and run. So even if you're not in a production environment, looking at this is really going to help you understand how a code system is coming together, and where you're going to have issues.
Yeah, and this what I love about RubyCritic is that it combines a bunch of gems that have been around for 12 plus years, like Flog, Reek, Churn, and it combines everything into this idea of the cost of a file to be maintained. So when we're talking about cost for a file, it's usually like a sum of the smells, so the code smells in a file, and the flog score. And the flog score comes from like assignment, branches, and calls. So I don't know. I just love that someone thought about this and created it and combined all the data. What I needed when I was starting to work and learn about this was, or I had this idea of combining code coverage data with the cost of maintenance of a file, and basically adding like a fourth or third dimension to say a file can be like super complex, has been changing a lot, and it's very poorly covered. So it has a test, but it only covers like 20% of the code. So basically, it's like if you're gonna go touch that file, good luck. You're
Yeah.
probably you're gonna have a rough week, rough month, because what you're changing is not tested and it's super complex. So
And that's where Skunk comes in, right?
yeah, and that's Skunk is basically that. It combines all those factors that I just mentioned, and it produces like little terminal table there. So quick warning, it is still pre 1.0, so it's going to change in before 1.0. But one of the things that I want to do when we get to 1.0 is to put A to F grade in every file, so that it's easier for people to understand, like the files at the top are an F, the ones at the bottom are an A, and all that.
I will tell you that I started using Skunk a few months ago because I understood right away that concept of, yeah, looking at the churn complexity graph tells you things to target, but there's some things in there that you probably want to be careful of. So, Skunk actually, a week after I started using it, saved me from potentially making a huge mistake getting ready to refactor a file that was way up in that quadrant that needed some work, but it only had 20% test coverage. So when I used Skunk, it was like, you probably don't want to do this yet. You want to work on your tests first. So
That's great.
it was
I
useful.
I love to hear that. Think as I think you probably talked about this with Chris in the last episode, but it's hard to get these sort of stories from people, like unless they come to me at after a talk or after a conference, from people to say like, "Oh yeah, I used the app and it saved me some time and it actually made me rethink refactoring that file. I wrote tests for it." Um, but yeah, I love to hear that story. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, sure. Well, this
Yeah, I
stuff.
can.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just saying, these tools I think are really great for espousing code quality and the need for different things to your managers as well as potential clientele if you're like a consultant, because you know you can take a look at the code, and if your manager says, what do you need this for, you can actually say, well, look at the numbers here. We've got this file that is super complex that has super low test coverage. If I start changing it, it's going to have wide impacts in the application, potentially cause downtime. That's why I need a little bit more time to add tests to it so that now I can safely make changes to this, code without impacting anything. And also, clearly, if you're a consultant, you can communicate it. I'm sure it helps you, like in your practice, to communicate to the client. This is why we need to add these tests before we start the upgrade process.
Yeah, yeah, and like as a consultant, I think it gives us more tools to communicate with our clients. At the end of the day, this is all open source, so I'm not making stuff up. Let's say,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it's common for a consultant to come in and say like, "Oh no, the previous consultant was terrible, was doing things all wrong," and just like you know, kind of like pile on the previous developer. I don't like that, to be honest, but I like to give it. I like the transparency of something like this or Code Climate, the visual parts as well of RubyCritic, of saying, "Hey, I'm not. It's not just my expert opinion. There are many tools out there that do static code analysis and all that, and I can tell you that you have 100 files and 20 of them are an F, and then you have like 0 test suites, no code coverage. You're not running your test suite in every PR. And there are a bunch of things that are wrong here, but I like to back it up with like science, or at least like a formula that is openly available and anybody can open it and see what it's doing.
Out of curiosity, so just to take a devil's advocate position for a moment, is there anything being reported in terms of complexity that's from the different tools like Flog or Reek or whatever that you actually disagree with? Like, for example, this particular thing where methods cannot be longer than, they shouldn't be longer than a certain number of lines or something, anything like that. Is there anything that you actually disagree with some of the standards that some of these other gems
Yeah,
have?
yeah. I disagree with a lot of those rules. I hate them sometimes. I hate Rubocop. I hate Reek many times, and I'm like, I'm gonna disable this rule, because I don't think that's the way to go. Um, so what I like to say, and when I'm talking about code quality, is that code quality in a code base is an understanding that the team has about code quality. So all of these tools that are out there are easy to configure. So you can disable the rules that you don't agree with, and you can basically tweak the idea of code quality, and you can agree as a team to be like, hey, let's have a conversation about this rule. I think it's kind of silly. I actually want us to embrace this other form, which is not the default that Rubocop, tells us. And if everybody comes to an agreement, great. You can all kind of like own the code quality of the code base. I think there has to be a conversation though. It can't be like, oh, there's one person and we're gonna do what the thing that one person is saying. I think it has to be a conversation, and it has to be written in the configuration of these tools, whether it's Reek or Rubicop or whatever. And if there is even like kind of like an architecture record or a decision record that's easy to find for the project, where it's like, hey, we discussed this, we agreed this configuration was better if we disabled it, so we're gonna go with this. With it this way. So yeah, I think there are a lot of rules out there that I don't agree with, and if I'm working on a code base, I'm probably going to disable some of the rules that are out there.
Okay.
So, chat. I know I've been kind of negligent in looking at you lately, but I'm so excited about this talk. I'm just kind of getting lost in it. So let's take a break for chat. Colin asked, do you have any sort of guidelines that you follow, like the Sandy Metz rules?
Okay, yeah. In terms of guidelines, oh, that could be like very broad, but anything specific, I'll just start answering saying that I like to go from process to first, and then look at the code quality. So when I'm looking at a code base, I like to talk to the team and try to understand how they ship code. So we still meet every now and then some teams that are not running the test suite in every PR. Like they are not familiar with CI, and it happens. There are a lot of teams out there. But anyway, one thing that I like to understand first is like, okay, how does a change make it from idea to production? And then I try to understand like if they're using best practices, like they're submitting a pull request, they are making sure that the test suite passes, they're making sure that they're smoke testing and everything is working, and then they're shipping things to production quickly and not just like batching a big release every month. I like teams that are shipping things like every day, or merging and shipping things all the time. And then once I'm happy with the process, or I make the suggestions about the process, then I try to dig deeper a little bit in the code base. I look at the test suite. I use SimpleCov. I make sure that they have some every time they submit a pull request, they're also submitting tests. The code coverage percentage is not getting lower and lower with every pull request. That kind of tells me a little bit about like the practice and the culture of the tech team. Another thing, once I learn all those things, then I look at RubyCritic, and I like to look at the churn versus complexity graph. Um, I like to use Skunk as well because it combines, the code quality metrics with the code coverage metrics. And yeah, before I suggest anything, I like to have as much data as possible to back it up. And sometimes well, most of the time, it's useful to have visual aids because at the end of the day, the tech team usually understands what you're saying as an engineer, but the non-technical manager that's managing the technical team has to understand too, and understand like what the consequences are of continuing with a poor process and a poor culture. And yeah, I'm still getting better at it. I'm still getting better at communicating to non-technical people, but I feel like with everybody here, I'm good at communicating like the technical metrics and all that. But when it comes to like talking to non-technical people, I'm not that good at saying like, hey, if you continue like this, people are gonna burn out, people are gonna leave. Nobody likes to work with Rails 2.3 when Rails 7.1 is out. So think about the consequences. Think about, people are going to leave, and your development team churn is going to be higher if you don't upgrade than if you do upgrade. So if you need to upgrade, then maybe you need to work on your test suite. And hopefully someday I'll be good at communicating this and explaining how everything connects. And if you want to have a successful business, you have to have a healthy tech team and culture.
Yeah, I found one of the key selling points for the non-tech folks when you're trying to get them to think about upgrades and stuff is if you don't keep up with your upgrades, you're exposing your business to very serious security risks, and exposure to lawsuits and all kinds of problems. So, covering the CVEs is really important for business. So, but you're right. That is a tough conversation because most of the time the non-technical people, the sales and the marketing side and the C-suite folks are more focused on what can we ship, what can we sell, what can make the profit for the company, and they're not thinking about, yeah, but the developers are blowing their minds because they can't wrap their heads around this complex mess that we've got. And every time we ask them to change something, they've got 3 weeks of sleepless nights because they don't have any tests to make sure that things are good. So it's a tough conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think in terms of security, that seems to be the main driver these days. I can't really say names, but we get contacted by public companies every month saying, "Hey, we're running this version of Rails, and we need to pass this PCI compliance test."
Oh no.
And it's like,
Good luck.
can you upgrade us from Rails 4.2 to Rails 7.1 in a month? Like, no, sorry.
Well, yes, if your program is Hello World, probably.
Right.
Yes, but there are 6 or 7 zeros attached to that number.
Yeah.
Not even all the money in the world, because it would be like committing to shipping an impossible project. Because the companies that reach out to us, as I said, they're public. They've been running this for 10 plus years, and it's been working. It's been working. It's legacy code. I like to think of legacy code as a great thing. It's serving its purpose. It's making the company money. But you should have been investing in paying off this technical debt every month in the past 10 years. And no, you didn't. You prioritize shipping features, shipping bugs, shipping bug fixes too. Um, and
It was
then
like,
you
pay me
can't.
now or pay me later.
Yeah, yeah, it's so yeah, then we do end up working on projects that are multi-million-dollar projects that are upgrade projects for huge monoliths. Um, but yeah, some clients want the impossible, and we can't promise that.
Well, and I think too, by the time that non-technical people notice the symptoms of technical debt building up, it's usually too late to do anything about it at that point in a cost-effective way. I mean, you're so far down the track of technical debt by the time non-technical people are seeing the problems from it that it's really hard to recover at that point.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that I was kind of interested in too, I've been thinking about this for a while, just curious, and since you talk to a lot more people about this stuff than I ever have, um, what is kind of your sense of in the development community, how many people are on the TDD bus and how many people are really anti-test?
That's a good question. Um, I want to say most of our clients are on the TDD bus. Most of the companies that we talk to and we don't end up working with because of technical reasons is because they don't see the value in tests. So um, they probably don't allow their programmers to spend the time writing the tests or maintaining the test suite. They're just like, no, you need to ship this fast. You need to ship it tomorrow. And I don't want you to work on tests. That takes more time. So don't do it. So unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that are like that. And yeah, it sucks. If you are a developer, an engineer who's in a team like that, um, you probably need to find another job. We're hiring. So if you're interested in technical debt, check out our website or find another company that really cares about that sort of stuff. Because something like that is like a culture problem, and it's not going to change if they just switch the manager. Hopefully it does, but sometimes there are like non-technical managers that just don't get it. And and anyway, they kind of create this toxic culture, and we usually don't work with those clients.
Have you ever had any success, and I mean, no naming of names, but taking a company who was really kind of tests, we don't care, to, oh yeah, we see the value now?
No, I haven't. No, I'm not a great salesperson. Sorry. I'm an engineer, and as I said, I'm still working on improving my sales skills to say, hey, you should be writing more tests, you should be doing TDD. Um, and I think I need to focus on the benefits at a business level, as in, you know, turnaround of your engineering team is going to go down. Velocity is going to go down. You're going to ship things faster. Instead of taking 2 weeks, you're going to take hopefully 2 days, 3 days. Um, you're going to be less exposed to risks, to CVEs, to security vulnerabilities, because you're going to be testing a lot more, and you're going to be testing better, and you're going to come up with better CI tools that will look for vulnerabilities in your code. But no, I'm not that good at selling that. I always tell my friends that i I try to say, hey, uh, your test suite is not good. We can't work on your upgrade project. We're happy to improve the test suite and bring you up to like 50% code coverage, but it's going to cost you 4 weeks. And it's going to, you know, at the end of the day, you get code that's going to help your test suite get better. But I never converted anything like that. Nobody ever took me up on that offer. I'll let you know once that happens.
That'd be interesting to hear. Yeah, because I've always wondered how, kind of how entrenched that thinking is, that anti-test thinking. Um, especially from the business side of things, because I know they see it as just a money sink. So, yeah, something I'd be interested to follow up on. So, what would you say to the engineering side of folks, especially new engineers that are coming in? What are the benefits of paying attention to code quality and test coverage and that area of your job?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits is that you can write code that it's easier to change. When you ship a feature, you try. We've all done that where we try to make it cool or we try to make it magic, and because we're just trying to implement like this pattern that we learned about and stuff. But at the end of the day, you'll learn within your career is that if you can write it as simple as possible, even if it's not super performant, even if it's not even if it takes like more files to ship it, if you can make it as anyway as simple as possible, and if you can write tests, and if the tests are easy to write, then you're on a good on the good track, because next time you need to make a change to it, you can go back to it like a year or 2 years after you wrote it, read it, and be like, oh, okay, yeah, there's not that much magic here. I understand what I did. I see the test suite. I see that I tested the edge cases, and now I just need to change it to meet another business requirement. So I think simplicity is the key there. It's like to try to, so all these Ruby gems will help you achieve something like that, and will guide you. I really like Rake in a way, because you can run Rake on your code, and it will tell you, it'll compare your code to a database of known code smells. It'll tell you like, hey, you have these code smells in here, so you might want to change it so it doesn't have them. And another thing that you will learn is like about code smells, because I don't even know all the code smells that are out there. I will go and run Rake on my code, and I'll learn a little bit about it. So if you want to get better at writing simple code, I would recommend using something like Rake to guide you in the process.
That's Reek, REEK, not Rake, RAKE.
Oh yeah, Rake, REEK.
Right?
Yeah.
That is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
So yeah. I'm wondering too, what kind of benefits that you would see for kind of senior level programmers paying attention to this stuff. So for junior level guys, it's really good for learning, discovering code, learning how to write better code. What benefits can the senior level developers pull from things like this?
I think it's the same. It's like sometimes as a senior, sometimes you think that you're writing something that doesn't have any code smells, and I still write code that has a ton of code smells. And I think you can learn a lot even as a senior developer using these tools. Another thing that you could learn from Skunk is like, I really like this one actually. There's a way to use Skunk to compare your branch against main, so you can actually compare it and see if you're adding a lot more smells, or are you making the project better or worse.
Right.
Usually, you'll see that the Skunk score is probably going to go up a little bit because you are adding complexity if you're adding a feature. But hopefully you're also adding like enough tests to cover your new feature. Another thing that I think is useful for any developer at any level is to have some sort of threshold for the test suite, to say, if you're adding a feature, if you're changing something, if you're fixing a bug. Sometimes in some projects, what I like to do is to add some sort of configuration to the test suite that says, like, if you are decreasing code coverage in the test suite, um, it won't let you merge it. It'll just say, like, hey, you are adding this code and it's dropping the test suite percentage from like 75 to like 74.5. So maybe don't do that. So that's one piece of advice for senior developers.
Yeah. And I know, so what is kind of your rule of thumb percentage goal for your test coverage? I mean, I know every project is a unique thing, but do you have kind of a rule of thumb, like I want to hit 80% or try to hit around 80% or something?
I think anywhere north of 70% is good. I mean, yeah, maybe getting past 80%, getting past 90% is good, but I don't think people should strive to have 100% code coverage. Maybe if you're building a rocket ship, yes. If you're building a medical device, yes.
If it's going to be used on me, please test it 100%.
Yes, please. But if you're just building a web app, a SaaS, I think it's okay to have 70%. I think if you're south of 50%, I'd say you're in trouble, and you should probably invest more time improving the test suite. But yeah, I think that's usually what I like to see, like more than 70%.
I've got
Because oh yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I have an interesting counter to that. So just as to play devil's advocate. So if you're a developer and you need to go in and add a new feature, and where you're adding the code to, the code coverage is 20%, even though the overall project is 80%. Are you really comfortable with your section that you need to start changing is only at 20%? Because I know I'd be like, well, I need to, even though the project's pretty high, the part I need to go change, I actually want test coverage for that to be pretty high.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on the file. Like, let's say it's a controller and a Rails app, and it's like 20%, but you need to change only one action. Then I would just focus on the action and say, okay, yeah, what is the code coverage percentage for the action? It's like, well, it's nothing, it's zero. So to take it from zero to something, I think it's very powerful. But yeah, I advise against adding test suite for other things that you're not supposed to be touching. Um, I yeah, I mean, I have gotten in trouble in the past for spending way too much time trying to improve the code when I was just supposed to ship a feature. So I'm also not a good example there. Like, I will usually take my sweet time to improve the code base, even if I'm supposed to just like move a controller action from one controller to another.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point to also, you got to consider what kind of developer you are, because some people just, they like building all the new things and want to build the feature and get the feature out and get that. Because I think to a certain extent, like releasing a new feature and having customers like my SaaS say, oh, this is so great, this is so awesome. You literally get a dopamine hit from that. Whereas if I'm developing more tests that they'll never see, and that doesn't do anything for me. Whereas maybe other developers, maybe more so like yourself, you get, you know, you get that dopamine. You like the fact that, oh, things are so ordered now, and now everything's nice and test covered and things like
Mhm.
that. So I think, like in my case, maybe some, depending on the developer, maybe they need to lean more towards paying attention to the tests and less the features, and maybe some other developers more to the features and less the tests.
Yeah, I guess I've been working with legacy code for a long time, and I think, yeah, when you're building something new like SaaS and you're maybe experimenting with a feature, trying to see like if people are even going to use it or not, or if it's going to add the value that you think it is, then yeah, I don't know. There is an exception there where it's like, well, I don't even know if this feature is going to be around for more than a month. So I don't know. Maybe you don't want to invest a ton of time in that test. But when I go into a project, usually it's because we're upgrading dependencies. So we're trying to just make sure that the code runs in two different versions of Rails. Um, Sometimes we get client engagements that are about improving their monoliths and maybe breaking it down into like smaller components, like using component based Rails architecture or something like that to make it easier to maintain. So we do have to move a bunch of files around to make it sure that it's easier to maintain. Um, One thing that I tell my team is that we usually want to follow the Boy Scout rule to make sure that we leave things better than how we found them. So if we see that we're moving some file or some action from one controller to another, and we see the opportunity to make it slightly better because I don't know, we could add a guard clause or whatever, or make the code easier to read if we just restructured it. I would advise to make it so. But yeah, before I refactor anything, I would make sure that it is covered by some sort of test.
And what's
Yeah,
your
I tend to use the Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. So I want to add the tests in before I go and change the code and for someone's code base.
so what is your tool of choice for code coverage?
So we are using SimpleCov, and I really like it. One thing that's um, a little buggy in Skunk is that I integrate it with SimpleCov, but I use internal files. So not a good idea to use like an internal file that is not supposed to be used for publicly. I did that. So anyway, I didn't know that. I didn't know it at the time. I thought that that file was just like, oh, I could just read this file and do things with it, get the data, the coverage data for every file, and compare it to the complexity and all that. But I think they recently added branch coverage. So
Yes.
every time you see a condition, right, you can know like whether the entire condition or all the possibilities of the condition were run or executed or not. Um, so anyway, I was using this file, and the guy who was maintaining it was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't be using this file because it's going to change because we're adding branch coverage to SimpleCop." And anyway, I had to do some hacky stuff for Skunk to work with different versions of SimpleCop. Um, but anyway,
The
fun
joys
stuff.
of OSS, huh?
Yeah, OSS moves fast, and anyway, I really like SimpleCop.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if you're already into this stuff, great. If you're not into this stuff, RubyCritic, SimpleCov, Skunk. That's where I would start. That
Mhm.
sound good to you?
Yeah, for sure. And I know we only touched a little bit on code quality, but um, I know there are other things that you could be doing to improve your code quality. And one of the things that you could do is also like work on performance optimization. Um, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about like a new audit that we came up with
Yeah.
in FastRuby.io. Um, we actually partner with Nate Berkopek, who is kind of the Rails performance guy out there, and he helped us come up with this idea of a performance audit. We're calling it Tune Report, and anyway, we recently launched it about a month ago, and we're trying to help clients who are having like slow endpoints and slow actions in their applications to get better and to get better performance. So if you're interested in performance optimization, we're going to be creating a bunch of content about that in the next few months. So feel free to, follow our blog or Twitter account.
And that's the one on FastRuby.io?
Yeah, fastruby.io/blog for the blog or /tune for the performance audit.
Tune, you said?
Tune, yeah. TUNE.
Right. Awesome. Well, I'll be looking at that. Hadn't heard about that yet, so.
Yeah, happy to talk about it, or on Twitter, feel free to DM me and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and honestly, oh my gosh, I do this every time we have a guest. I have so much fun talking to the guests and learning so much that I completely lose track of time. And we are past our time. So as much as I'd love to spend another 2 hours talking to you, I have to let the audience go.
Okay.
But what I would like to do is try to get you back on the show at some point and have some further discussions about code quality and particularly about Tune after I've had a chance to take a peek at it. I'm very interested in the performance stuff. But we thank you so much for being on the show with us, taking time out of your schedule. I know that you're busy,
Yeah.
but being here and talking to us has been a big thrill for us. I hope it's been wonderful for the audience as well. I know that I learned quite a few things tonight, and I'm very interested to learn some more. But
Yeah,
thank
thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you so much for being with us. Chat, thank you as always for being here. We love it when you guys come and participate. Makes us feel all loved and warm and fuzzy and stuff. So that's always good. If you did enjoy this, please make sure and like, subscribe. The best thing you can do to help the channel is tell your lovely friends about us and bring them next time. We're here every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on both Twitch and YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter at DuckyDevShow and see all my bad tweeting habits. What are you going to do? But we hope you guys enjoyed that. I really did, and I'm very thankful for Ernesto and all of our guests. Next week, we will continue the awesome August guest list with Aaron Francis. He's going to be talking about his experiences with live coding. So that'll be an interesting and fun show.
Is he going to live code during this stream?
Gosh, I don't know. Live coding on the live show. It's like Liveception or something. But anyway, we will see you guys next week, Wednesday at 8 p.m., Twitch and YouTube. Please reach out to me on Twitter. Love to talk to you guys. And until next week, happy coding.
Happy coding.
Happy coding.